Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brenda Likens, Mayor Pro Tem in for Tracy Monkley, who's unavailable today. We're here for the Gift Card Study Session, July 20th, 2023. The time is now 3:01 p.m. and I'm gonna do roll call. Hopefully I'll get everyone's names this time. Okay. Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Councilmember Storsett.
Here.
Yeah, Councilmember Rother.
Here.
Councilmember Wolf. Here. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes, here.
Okay, Councilmember Barber.
Here.
All right, and I'm Councilmember Likens. I think I already said that. And then our staff today, we have our city administrator. If you want to introduce.
Yes, we have pinch hitting for Josh and Tiffany today. Maureen Whitaker, esteemed executive assistant health worker. Jeff Langhelm, Public Works Director. Ashley Emery, I'm not sure where you're with, but you're with you. Yeah. Utility extraordinaire, and then I believe we have Jeff Olson and Eli with us here from the Operations Center.
Okay, terrific. So we have one agenda item today. So if I can do a good job and get us out on time, I'm gonna really hope for that and try for that. I'll plan on taking a break about an hour in. If anybody needs one before, just let me know. And we do have chocolate, so feel free to spray around. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Jeff Lincoln.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, before I actually get into the topic at hand, which is utility rate study, I just wanted to mention, and especially since Eli and Jeff are here, I was notified today. Today was the day for shutoffs. We were down to, when I last reported, I think it was about 12. Just the other day it was 5, and as of today, when we were actually going out to shut off, we didn't shut anybody off.
Yeah.
Eli and Jared.
Yeah.
Jeff and his crew,
Thank
I
you.
mean, they're the ones who are out there leading the charge and trying to make sure that we don't wash up.
Did the program with fish have anything to do with that?
I don't know if it did or not.
Here for a couple of people.
Okay, great.
Well,
Good news.
yeah, we didn't start recurring people until we were about ready to shut off. So that was great.
That's great.
That said, I mean, reason we shut off is delinquencies, and it's gonna change a little bit starting the 23rd of July due to extreme periods of extreme heat, but we're working on that and trying to sign the policy, so we're moving forward with that now. So, anyway. All right, utility rate study. So question might come, and I'm sure most of you don't have this question, but it might come to somebody about why do we look at rates? Why do we look at rates? How often do we look at rates? And what is our history? So I want to go through that real quick. And I'm going to share my screen. I was too busy talking and not paying attention to bring up my spreadsheet. So I'll be there in just a second.
While Jeff is pulling that up, I will let you know that I just received an email from the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area that our application to become a partner was approved.
Yeah.
So
Lots of yays today.
we are now in that coalition.
Cool. Okay, so share my screen. Doesn't matter. Typically, water, sewer, storm is the way we often go through these, so I'm gonna try and stick to that just because that's the one I know. So I just want to share with you real quick why we do rate studies. Because it's as long and short as we have capital needs, project needs, and we have operations and maintenance needs. I know that in theory, when you look at funding utilities, you might ask, well, you get more customers, don't those customers pay for themselves? Well, they do when you look at a snapshot in time. But of course, we always have higher costs, maintenance costs, staff costs, capital costs, and we have more regulations. So for a snapshot in time, yes, those customers pay for what you have, but we're ever increasing. And so what I'm gonna look at is I'm gonna look at, just go through real quick before we get into the reason Ashley's here. Ashley is extraordinary with Excel and the rate model that he's gonna go through, but I'm just gonna give some background. So just looking roughly, we're talking about possibly adjusting rates for the next 6 years, looking forward, starting January of 2024.
And that's typical. You always do 6-year increments.
Yeah, that's been our focus. There's been times where it's just snippets here, snippets there, year here, year there, but it's best in our opinion. to do
Everybody
6 years.
takes 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
universal.
Out of all at once. So one of the things we look at is what are our capital needs? These capital needs is what was provided to Ashley with help from Chuck and Jeff and myself. And just, it's no need to study these in depth, but just to look at the bottom line, when you look at how much each year we have in capital needs, those are big numbers for what we do. And so I'm gonna stop sharing, I'm gonna jump over, and that's water, and then I'll just quickly share sewer. Some of these numbers get pretty big. It's a little slow on adjusting, but some big numbers there, and then stormwater. Also, not as big a numbers, but of course, we don't have the same utility demands, but these are some big numbers, especially for stormwater. If you ever looked at stormwater in the past, we didn't have numbers big. Yes.
Yeah, so curious, when you're building the numbers and we're going out in years, are you putting in a formula for increase in population? Or do you already have our water system, sewer system, stormwater system built out to the maximum population that we?
We don't, that's what Ashley helps with. Ashley does population projections, which I'm gonna talk about here, that of course, population projections are much lower growth than what we have seen in the past. But Ashley's model helps with that. It anticipates number of customers.
Typically capital projects for, and especially in Gig Harbor's case, it's not really being driven by growth. It's more repair and replacement and stuff that almost all the water lines, all the water stuff is that. Sewer treatment plants do have capacity issues, but your growth days are kind of over. So this is all big projects that have been sitting out here for a long time to do.
Well, we think they are. We were asked to put in 892 units in the next 20 years. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but that was the target that we got from Pierce County and the Department of Commerce.
And so much of previous council policies have been that growth pays for growth. That's not always the case in water. It's usually the case in sewer and storm. We're not going, in some cases, developers have built tanks for us. But in most cases, we're not gonna ask anybody to drill a well for us. So that growth is something that we take on as the utility. We recognize that, but in most cases, sewer and stormwater, the developers build the infrastructure and then we take it over. So you don't see that kind of impact to the utility. It just, as Ashley was saying, we just have to maintain and operate it and rebuild it when something gets too old.
You want to?
Sure, yeah.
So I didn't get to look at the water capital projects, but just a question, is there anything built in there? We have to do increased treatment of our water? Right now, it's pretty minimal, but I expect in the future, we're gonna have
An
to start.
expensive project.
Yeah, so I'm just, and I didn't say, but these projects, dollar amounts, not necessarily because dollar amounts have changed. These
Yeah.
projects come from our utility comprehensive plans. So if you look at the water system plan, sewer comp plan, stormwater comp plan, that's where the origins of these projects come from. We staff have looked at this and provided Ashley with updated cost estimates because some of the scopes have changed, increased unfortunately. And costs have risen. And then Ashley takes them, puts them into his model, and he does projections of 4, 5, 6 years out, how much those based on current dollars, what those projects would cost in the future.
So
all
we're
that's
buried
built
in
in.
there, there's that.
Yeah, and now, so actually he takes these numbers, we give these numbers to Ashley. Ashley takes the number and he puts it in his model, which you'll see, comes from.
Did I see on the first slide that you did not take inflation into consideration?
These don't, we let Ashley do that.
Okay, these aren't actually,
No,
We want the ability to change. I
yeah,
want the ability to come to you and say, I put in 5% increase for next year. And if you guys say, no, we want 6 or 7, then I change it.
Yeah.
So he gives me raw numbers in today's dollars, and we go from there.
so what did that, can you go back to the
Yeah,
first slide? So
I think
see what it
so.
said?
These are in 2023
Yeah,
dollars.
that was my note to him.
Yeah.
Sending it, saying, make sure you understand,
Yeah.
so that you
remind-
match it, because the comp plans don't inflate. So it makes it easy for him to match projects if the numbers.
Okay,
So
got it.
just the process is Ashley gives us the spreadsheet and we update it and then we give it back to Ashley. He takes that number in that format and puts it into his model.
Sure, got it.
That's our common
Yeah.
document that we can talk back and forth about.
So that's just a quick overview again of, we have a lot of money that we need to spend to do a lot of maintenance costs on our capital. The next item is just that, it's just operations and maintenance costs in general. That's how much does it cost the treatment plant to get chemicals, the water system, how much does it cost to get chlorine? And to do the maintenance on the wells, as we've been talking about in the past, it costs us a lot of money to pull a well every few years and inspect it, clean it and do everything else. And then when we do find problems, then we gotta fix it. So that's where we are with well 5. And we did that with well 6 earlier. But also as we expand, grow, add treatment to water systems, whatever might be coming, we as staff provide actually input of, do we need additional staff, additional FTEs? And so we have gone through these 3 utilities and it lines up with what we see in our comprehensive plans. We are requesting throughout this 6-year period that we're gonna be adding 2 FTEs to water, 2 operators, and 1 FTE to sewer, and 1 FTE to storm. Yes.
I don't think you can base increased rates on the speculation that there's gonna be an accident or an emergency or something like that. So how do you cover, or is that covered under what?
Well, we have ending fund balances. We cash on hand. We need to make sure that we have, I think Dave's minimum is 60 days cash on. Dave isn't here anymore, but I think it's a 60 days cash on hand.
I don't
We-
care what it is, I'm never letting you. do
Yeah, we're never dropping. So
Okay.
we're well above that, just for operating expense, but that's how we do. it. And
There are formulas that Department of Health. They want. They
And they
want
can't
the
even
60,
understand.
90 days of operating, they want your most critical capital facility to be able to replace that on an emergency basis. So you're running a huge system here. And dropping for the water and sewer funds, you really can't drop much below 2, 3, 4 million.
Okay.
It's unwise.
And Jeff, we were talking yesterday about bonding for capital projects. I think in an emergency situation, if it's something that was wholly unanticipated, we do have bonding capabilities in order to have cash on hand to take care of utilities in an emergency.
Yeah, and loans between the utilities and those kinds of things.
But you can,
Councilmember Luke.
How often can we go up for a bond for an emergency? If we've gone up for another bond, can we, how many, how
It's
often? what?
kind of if there's an emergency, you go short term, everything's done, but then at some point you come back with a bond. Bonds don't get issued overnight. But it's, the city of Gig Harbor with the full faith and credit, it's not an issue. If you needed $5 million tomorrow, you could get it.
Okay, thank you.
We're very lucky in our city, and Dave Rodenbach was here, he's not, he's done a really good job taking care of us financially, and we're very lucky to have not had to bond for infrastructure in the city, but most cities do. And so we can have multiple bonds out at one time for various things under different conditions.
And you'll see even Ashley, I mean, I don't want this to get into a conversation on emergencies and bonding, because that's really not, I mean, that's something we consider, but it's not. Ashley takes into account, and you'll see in his spreadsheet, you'll see our loans, our bonds dropping. We make payments every year on bonds, and you'll see as we go year by year, those numbers drop because some of the bonds go away.
So, Ashley, would you prefer just clarification questions and then to get through kind of your presentation, or do you want questions along the way?
You just fire up, don't need to just interrupt me and say, I got a question.
Okay,
Because it may not be
It
to
might
me
go-
10 minutes later.
sure, sure.
Okay, so just we touch on growth. We recognize that growth numbers are not what they used to be for us. We have accounted for that in the model that you'll see with Ashley. And so just keep that in mind. And then I just want to quickly go through past rate adjustments. So we keep this running tally just for your history. You can see where we've been in the past. I'm going to share on my screen real quick. It's going to be kind of small, but the numbers you can see over water rate history. Sorry, kind of small numbers, but this tracks back to 1987 for water. It shows all the rate increases we've done. You'll see a lot of zeros there. And then after a lot of zeros, a lot of double-digit rate increases, 38%. And granted, you look at the number, it goes from $10 to $13, but still, the percentage-wise, huge increases. We are trying to reverse that trend. We're trying to do, as you see, starting in 2015, do consistent rate increases like Ashley was saying. For COVID, we skipped 2 years, but as you recall, probably we did an across the board 5% rate increase. I think that was a great solution to not having increases for a few years. It has helped us already. It could be a lot worse. Sewer is the same way. I don't know if you can see sewer, but we keep these, and so you can see where we are along the way. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley. He's going to probably give you a quick orientation of the model because it's a very challenging. He wrote this Excel spreadsheet and did all the macros himself. And so it's quite detailed. There you go.
That does mean, Ashley, you'll never be able to retire.
Yeah.
I was gonna start off, I've been working for you guys for over 20 years.
Wow.
And so it's amazing. It's been a pleasure, but I'll tell you what, this is probably the most critical set of rates in that entire time span. You guys have been operating under the beautiful scenario of high growth. And we would come into these sessions, we would look at these big capital lists, and then we look, and we were projecting $2 million a year in system development charges, connection fees in sewer, $1.5 million in water. And believe me, that builds a lot of projects. It just made everything go so easier. And we met this year and it was like, well, what was growth last year? And it was peanuts. The year before, not much better. And you look at what's in the pipeline. It's so we've essentially we're necking things down. We're no longer forecasting 3-4% growth. We're down in the 0.5%, 1% range. And because of that, you guys are setting now the standard for how it's going to be treated in the future, because every future city council is going to have to go through the same thing. If you need money, it's rates. There's no panacea, there's no elixir out there. It also means that, and thank God you guys did. You guys set aside money. So we're starting with adequate reserves in everything other than stormwater. Stormwater is just because it's a new fund, relatively new fund, and it's a small fund. So that's a basket case and it will be for a while. But water and sewer, you're starting with really good reserves. And I think it's really important that you fought so hard to get there. We don't want to give it up now because that is the one thing that's going to keep your rates low, is being able to wisely use those funds, dip into it to cash finance when you can and make life easier, avoid the debt cost, but you just don't want to stick your head in the mud. As Jeff said, you're actually in a time phase now where water and sewer actually, their debt burden is going down significantly. It has gone down. The last rate study we did, like a third of your debt costs, just the bonds were done. So that was over. And instead of looking at that as, oh, well, now we have all this cash on hands, let's just spend it out of cash and build capital projects. No, we need to keep, you had so much capacity in your rates to pay debt. We need to maintain that. It's how we long-term finance operations. It's essentially depreciation funding. That's the same. So that's what we're gonna concentrate on. And hopefully this will.
You can do
Yeah. Okay, so every fund is gonna look the exact same. But you have.
I would just focus on.
Yeah, I know.
You don't look at that. It's
Yes.
delayed, so it throws you off.
I was just wondering what the heck I was gonna do.
Yeah, just focus on it.
Yeah.
It throws me off.
Okay, so every fund looks the same. What we start off with is a top. That is your standard residential monthly, bi-monthly bill. Before taxes. So after this 5% rate increase, your standard water customer is paying $42 a month. There's the percentage rate increases when we need to make adjustments, and then it'll show that. You know, roll that in. Everything is tied. Here's the whole enchilada. That is your checking account, that is your savings account, just treat it like the personal finances. We run some business, it makes so much operating revenues, it costs us to do this. And then we've issued some debt. Those are the bills that have to be paid. They have to be paid from rates. Then we come down to our capital, where we have a starting reserve balance. We get connection charges, those system development fees, plus some interest costs, interest earnings. Then if we have a positive cash flow, it rolls into from operations. And then if we're gonna take out any loan funds, get any grant funds, or if we're gonna pay for capital, comes out of there, and then that shows us where we started. So you can see we brought in a little bit of money and then we took it on the chin. We paid for this one ourselves, and so we're gonna lower our reserves by a couple $1 million just in 1 year. So you can see what the two critical things are is we try and never run a negative annual operating budget. We're willing to do it short term because this is a long-term game. Financing utilities is a long-term game, and I'm not gonna set rates high enough just to avoid 1 or 2 years of zero or negative cash flows, as long as they're bouncing back. The other thing that we have to do is we cannot use your reserves. Those cannot go negative. That's just, like we said, emergencies, that's where we can solve it temporarily, but no, that's not how you run the utility. So as soon as that reserve is going down, then we're in trouble.
So rent's negative on your?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Might have been critical. It's what,
Actually,
yes,
the 2023 number includes the 5%.
it does.
Okay, wow,
So you can
okay,
see the
just wanted to
305,
make sure.
that 5% rate increase
Yeah.
was good for $150,000.
Okay, thank you.
That's just water.
This is why.
Yeah, look at the very bottom tab is
Oh, yeah.
water.
Yes,
Okay,
my apologies, that's an excellent point too.
Thank you.
This is all, the summary is based on individual line items. You can see, this is the funds that are recorded in your annual statements. We split up revenues, simple stuff. By doing this at this level, we don't expect city government to grow on water operations. You know, they don't go along with your population growth. So we don't have a factor for them growing, but we certainly do commercial and residential. And we have the ability, any variable you want, you can raise your hand and we can check, we can change. The idea is we're not gonna substitute our opinion for yours. We're gonna lay it out and allow you, if you want to change what we're gonna debt finance, how low we're gonna go on reserves, what the rates are gonna be each year. Do we wanna do a bunch of big ones at the start and then taper it off? Do we wanna do an even one? If you can ask it, I can change it, real time without any delay. So I've started with what I call baseline, which is these are expenses, these are capital projects, and we're not doing anything other than cash finance. So this is the, oh no, I'm not gonna do anything. And I expect Jeff to build the planned capital over the next 6 years. This is what happens. You are bankrupt in 2.5 years. And your rate revenue is dwindling to negatives. And you can see where that's, what's going on is we're spending $19 million capital fund. Nothing you can do about it. But as I said, debt wise, things are really looking good. You've only got 2 debts, I believe, on water. And one of them's coming out in another 6-7 years, which considering these are 20-year, that's the end of this. It's almost, I can see it. I can taste it. But even at 245,000, when you're looking at $3 million in revenues, this is not bad. Less than 10% of your bill is going towards annual debt. So you're an outlier now as a city when it comes to water debt. You are well below the norm. And from my standpoint, you don't want to be an outlier ever. What it's saying is you're not actually capturing enough annual long-term depreciation funding in your rates. And so if you let that go by the wayside, your system just runs to rot. So we actually, the good news is we want you to take out debt. You actually need to take out debt. We need to raise rates to accommodate that. And it's a good thing for the long-term financing. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Okay, can you explain to me end of year cash in 2026 going out to 2036? End of year cash.
It's just getting less and less and less because we haven't done any rate adjustments or debt finance anything.
So that's where Ashley was saying, if we do nothing except build projects, leave the rates the same, don't take out loans, we will be bankrupt in 2020.
This is not a strategy. This is where we start.
Oh, okay. I thought this was a strategy.
Yeah, I did too, and I was trying to figure out why there was so much spread.
Yeah, so in 2026, essentially, we start going negative.
Yeah.
If we don't.
If we continue to build our capital program as we've described, and we don't take loans and we don't raise rates. But we're here to talk about.
That's why we're here.
Well, 3 options. Do we not do capital projects? Do we raise rates? And do we take out loans?
So you talked about 10% being for total debt.
Yes.
Yeah. So and you said we're the outlier. What is not the outlier? What's kind of the mean or average for a city?
I'm sure there's some numbers published anyway. You're gonna have to go by my gut.
Okay.
I would expect 25%.
Okay. That's useful.
25%, I wouldn't blink an eye.
Okay.
When I get up towards 50% now, I'm
Uncomfortable.
guys, we're out of control and we're probably over. The whole goal is this concept of depreciation funding. I have to put away enough money to be able to, for the long-term health. If my rates do not include enough capital costs in there to offset annual depreciation, every time a project has to come up, I have to go out and debt finance. And that just doesn't work. I'm not correctly, the people who are using the water should be taking part of that cost. Because every year that you run the system, 1/30 of that pump house, 1/30 of its lifetime is gone. and I'm gonna have to replace it. So we want to fairly spread these costs over the longest term possible, and people do that by depreciation funding. Well, nobody does depreciation funding. So we think about it in layman's term, depreciation funding is your debt payments, because it's capital, it's a capital payment. You have that built into your rates. So here, what we're trying to do is, or we're gonna show you is in this case, the water utility is perfectly primed to use debt fund. There's no worries, we need to take on more debt to manage that long term. It's no rate increase is a good thing, but by God, I'm not gonna keep my rates low just to spend my reserves down when I know I'm not getting them back. Yes,
Is there any capital, that we, like projects that we could use to improve the infrastructure to eventually lower rates? And is it making water more readily available? So that while we have this, you know, a little bit of a surplus, I know it's not planned out very long, but is there a way, you know, and our rates aren't bad. I mean, I'm looking at this comparison of other municipalities. And it's all over. I think the lowest just I was 25 up to 77. But we're so, you know, we're in the middle, the cities are crazy. But is there a way to eventually, you know, water is more plentiful?
if you could keep growing,
Just more people?
more,
To get
the
lower
more,
rates.
the more water you sell, the better off everybody is from a rate standpoint. What you find over the years is you almost have zero ability to control O&M costs. It's
Okay,
like everything else, 65%, 70% of your costs are salaries.
yeah,
You can't cut people. They're
no,
already.
yeah, I wasn't suggesting.
No, and I'm not saying. But when you realize your hands are really tied, there's not a lot. That's why we don't spend, I won't spend any time, we do with internally with staff. We go line item by line item each, what do you think is gonna happen here? Do we need more people? Are we gonna shave this? Can you do a process improvement to get rid of this? And we look, well, once we've gone through that exercise, the ability to change that O&M number, the 2677 million, it's almost impossible. Almost impossible. So everything is wrapped up in capital projects and debt financing. That's the dance, that's the decision, that's the fulcrum that we're balancing.
Want to say something?
Oh, sorry.
I'll bring it up now that we've been talking here like water's an infinite resource. Got plenty of it, don't have to worry about it. Thus, the actual value of the water is zero. The real value is it costs us money to pump it out of the ground. That's what's being looked at. And then we got O&M costs, everything else. We know though that water is not an infinite resource. We know that we're mining groundwater. We know that the more people that grow outside of the city limits, they're all sticking their straw in the same bathtub and using the same aquifer. But I didn't see anything in here that says, okay, here's how we set our rates based on finances and O&M costs and marginal cost to produce an extra gallon of water, or, you know, how much somebody uses. But what I was hoping to see was something in here that said, with the changing climate, with the lack of rainfall, do we need to do something else as far as the rates go to encourage water use? If we make water cheap, then why in heaven's name would I even care if my sprinklers are running all night? Honestly, gosh. And water is it's a finite resource and it's a critical resource. And I didn't see anything, and you've done a wonderful job of that. I'm saying this is fantastic. But I don't know if that bigger thing, whether we're looking at it, if one of you guys know that the aquifer that we're tapped into is an infinite resource, it's never gonna run out, good, this is it. But I don't know anybody can.
No, that's why we introduced the request for Ashley to participate with tiered water rates.
Yeah,
So that
Yeah.
those tiered water rates, as we will discuss after we go through the model, is going to be a conversation that Ashley's gone through and had some preliminary projections and some suggestions, and that's that survey that you saw that Ashley put together to just start what is reasonable for us.
I didn't see that noted in here, but if that was behind it,
Well,
that's
this is the base rate.
that's okay.
This is the base rate.
Yeah.
And everything. And again, you don't see here necessarily the commodity charges. I mean, that's
Okay,
Nobody as of that I know of yet is applying that rationale to water rates.
Why would-
The difficulty of putting a dollar value. Because now you're asking customers to pay more for something that doesn't cost more. Because your market, your idea about the offer, not idea, your statement about the offer is perfectly right. And the cities, most cities' reaction is, well, when things start getting bad, I have to make sure that we can't produce any more water, and we need to encourage conservation.
that's the wrong time to do it though, because then the methods you have to do become draconian. It's like, now we gotta start cutting off water because there's not enough. Not saying that we're there yet. But for heaven's sakes, we often seem to do this. We just wait and wait and wait. All of a sudden, there's a crisis, and then we're running around with our heads cut off.
You're right now, your water rate, your water sewer storm rates they're not even middle of the road, they're the upper tier. We're not talking 90th, we're probably in the 70th percentile. You are not giving away anything for free. These are relatively robust water rates. And if you use a lot of water, your bill is considerable. So there's no incentive to not conserve water unless you're immune to it. If I make $1 million a year, you can't set the rate high enough to affect me. But we have to be concerned about those sort of things because the majority of revenues come from people who use less than 8,000 gallons a month.
And
That's
that's
not a
where,
lot of water.
and that's where tiered rates could help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hardly agree with I'm a little bit embarrassed that I hadn't recommended it sooner. But it's a good opportunity we really don't wanna make it down so much, because if you told me that we were gonna to make people conserve 10-15% of their water, I could do a 10-15% rate increase. And that's hard to absorb too.
That's okay. Councilmember.
Actually, that's what I was gonna. Well, I've lived in jurisdictions before where we've gone into major drought issues. And so everybody pulls back and says, we heard you, we're good soldiers, right? We're right behind you, General. And then you get the thing from the water department going, well, we didn't ask you to cut back that much because our revenues are declining. And this was significant. So it's really difficult to build a rate such as that. So it would be like, what's that communication? What are those things that we all should be doing, knowing that potentially we're gonna see more drought years, given the long-term plans that I've been looking at, and I'm sure you've been looking at. I think, Jeff, you mentioned something that we have, if everything stays status quo roughly, we have probably about 70 years with our current water supply, if I remember that conversation correctly. I might be wrong.
I think that might have come from the USGS model, but I don't remember if they put. I think that was based off of a bunch of assumptions, and that was it. That was worst case scenario.
And so what we may have to even go to, this was rising sea levels. We're not gonna probably see it, but at some point, people might even have to look at desalination efforts and all of that for water. So we're trying to build a good model that's 6 years out, which I think is a reasonable forecast timeframe. Just curious about also what are we seeing from a regulatory standpoint, not only from the state and the county, but from the federal government, how much of impact is the water, sewer and storm with different regulatory issues coming down at you, and all of a sudden we were gonna plan to fix something or a capital project going this pathway. Now we have to go this to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a lengthy discussion. There is one. First, two things. We don't see really anything from the regulatory agencies wanting us to reduce our per capita water use. It's more, we want to reduce the leakage that we have in our system, which I don't know the number that we do. I think that we're typically at about 6%. That's the goal, less than 6% leakage. But we also have, as you will see, and you glanced at the CIP, there's treatment for one of our wells. manganese removal treatment. The new regulations coming down will likely have us treating all of our wells, and treatment is not cheap. So, and you need to have a treatment system right at the wellhead. If you know our wells 5 and 6, that's a postage stamp lot with 2 wells on it. There's no room for treatment, so that will be required probably. It's very likely we will be doing treatment at all of our well sites soon. This plan only shows 1 well site in this 6-year period, which that might have a big effect on our capital, because there's a bunch of unknown numbers that we haven't added in yet there.
So we're building a plan, we have to
Yeah.
account for, again, it's unknown at this moment, but you do get a little whisper every once in a while about something coming down.
We do, it depends on who you talk to. Some people say you can do it immediately and start right now, and others are like, well, you know, there's gonna be a lot of challenges and everything else, so we may not have to do all of them, but we can focus at least, and that's what we're planning on. Let's focus on where our worst producers are and start there.
Implementing and you will have complete ability, we're gonna come with the same level of sophistication when it comes to water rates. The volume rates, you're gonna be able to set exactly, I want this range and I want this rate, I want more, I want this sort of change. And if you choose to elect higher tiers, and higher rates for those top tiers, you're gonna influence behaviors, and that will allow you to address that. Longer term, I think much more important is your city, how you drive the development, landscaping, having really rigorous controls over what you allow. That is the single biggest thing you could do for long-term waste of water. Because when it comes down to it, if you're worried about an aquifer, why the heck are we running a 2-acre lawn?
So I just want to do a time check real quick. We've got 1 hour and 15 minutes left. It's going to take Ashley, at my guess, at least an hour to go through each of these 3 utilities in the spreadsheet. So I knew that we were going to be tight on time, even at 2 hours. We may have to just come back and talk about more later. But I would say if we can start to jump in.
I can do some things to speed it up too.
Is that 2026, the 7.582 million, is that the manganese,
I don't know, Ashley's got that. They'll tell you exactly what it is. See,
one of our wells?
Well, 5 and 6 rebuild.
and then well 9 over at the top.
And
So
well 9, those are
you've got
Okay, so that would be anticipating in 2026 that we're gonna be constructing the manganese.
no, that's just the well rebuild.
Oh,
So if you can scroll down, Ashley, where's the,
well treatments there.
well 6 treatment, yeah, there's well treatment.
30.
Well, and that's even X out of outside our 2 window. So that's assuming no treatment in the 6-year window. Which is.
That was
not
one of
realistic.
the adjustments that staff made.
mhm.
If we put that in the 6-year window, the rate impact was exorbitant. You guys have a history.
And we're gonna meet with DOH, Department of Health, to determine if they're gonna make us do this sooner.
Well, I'm trying to find out from leadership at Department of Health if the words that their staff are saying are accurate, or if it's just that's their goal.
Okay, but for now, we'll go with this.
For now, we think we're going.
Okay, why don't you go, keep going?
Okay.
Stop this with you.
So, could take a lot more time to walk through this, but if I just load up one of the solutions.
So these solutions are ones that we have worked with Ashley on, Ashley's modified. So again, you see at the top, it says 6-year capital, it used to say baseline. Baseline was do nothing. It'd say 6-year capital, all of a sudden those rate increases, there's loan funds that are increased and everything else. So just be cautious. And because again, this is a very complicated spreadsheet actually has. So pay close attention to what that says up there. That says 6-year capital.
And 2 is take that out. So what we've done is, and nothing happens quick, financing and utilities. So we can't drive staff, we only got so much staff. And we're already mid-year 2023, the idea of having revenue bond funds in place to start design and construction within a couple of years. It's just too much. So we're kind of forced into the first debt finance you're gonna see is 3 years out, which is why we are spending some money in the next couple of years that we don't have a choice. The only way these projects, and that's the tank recoating, well 9, PRV, and the share of public works. The only way those things are getting done is they're coming out of reserves. Now, that's perfectly acceptable. We're starting at 10 million. It's the trend that I'm worried about. We don't want to keep doing it. So you can see along the projects that we're debt financing is a loan for the SO1 and the well house 5 and 6.
What was the first one? SO1?
It's the first sort, ignore that number. It's a numbering system that's in the water system plan.
Okay.
It's the source project number 1,
Oh,
but it just says well line.
So that is that project. We're not able to, like I said, this is a little too quick. So we're gonna have to eat that, but that'll be a construction. And we can do that at the same time as 5 and 6. So those projects are gonna be debt financed. And what you see is these debts, when they pop up, they start the year after construction is done. And they reach their maturity, and then you got 20 years of those payments. So up in the summary, you can see we're chugging along, no complaints. And then we're gonna pop up to $840,000 in debt payments. That puts us, what, 25, between 25 and 30%. I'm not gonna blink an eye at that, not at all. Now, of greater concern is even with this 5%, you can see our slim, we are really slim. Now that it's a little odd in that we have a big expense, $150,000. But anyway, you gotta be making more than that off of $3 million. 10% should be the minimum that you sock away. And of course, the bigger problem is we've got to now match this. Now, you can stick your head in the sand. That's kind of what you'd be looking at. Nobody likes that.
What about the out years adding in?
Exactly, we can spread this across, can't we?
Yeah.
Now, when we did that, and that's our 6-year window,
Yeah, and that's the key, is that the 6-year window is through 2029.
Yeah.
now that, what we didn't like here is, and I heard a comment over there, it's not good enough. We also didn't like how big we had grown the revenues. That's robust enough. The way to compensate for this is to do a little bit more in the start years. So instead of doing, we kind of like the looks of, and I think actually this set back even more. Let me. Yes, so we looked at a couple of 10s and then sinking it back to 2.5%.
But why can't we spread those kids out?
Yeah,
Well, remember, when just by going between, we were up to 6% and we weren't quite happy. And I wasn't happy with the level of magnitude of the net income at the end point of the study, the 6 years. This way you can see we're taking a hit now, but now we're settling in at a reasonable number. We're not really taking it out of rate customers. Now let's see, let's just check this out. So we're at $8 million in reserves. We're making $350,000. Yeah.
You have to mention though, there was some stuff in this that we hadn't even added in, which were big ticket items like gotta treat 2 wells.
We're paying for everything in your CIP. We're debt financing the two projects.
The water treatment. I
The
thought-
well 6 treatment is out, is in 30.
It's the next,
Okay.
Yeah,
that's the end of our
That's-
conversation about water.
Going way too far ahead.
Then- This is what I said, this is a really critical piece.
Yeah.
Because my recommendation is you look at a 10-year, 12-year window and set rates for that period to take advantage of doing things now and minimizing down the road. But we'll show you that. You don't have to.
That's fine with that.
Why is 2027 net revenue so different? The three
The
numbers
debt.
above it don't look that,
You went from two.
oh, the debt is,
Now
okay,
the debt's
there's
coming.
the difference, okay,
And that's
thank you.
full blown.
Yeah.
That's your maximum debt. And then you see that one comes off.
Yeah,
And that gives us a little more breathing space.
okay, I didn't notice that number, thank you.
That's that 20-year bond you would take to finance those projects, and that's why. Okay. All right, so that, in this scenario, are both the bond and an increase rate. Okay.
Now, the long-term picture is we've got a bunch. You can see we've got $24 million scheduled in the next time phase.
Yeah,
And you can do this, you can take the minimalist approach. However we get there, a couple big ones, some smaller ones, even across, doesn't matter to me, as long as you're happy with the balance. But if we do this, take this approach, that means the next rate study you do, you're gonna be forced with either a large rate increase or delaying capital. And this is where the, we've been shoving this capital out for a while now.
and this is where, when we first started this conversation with Ashley, for water, Jeff Olson and I were looking at that, and Ashley said, what can you push out? Our homework assignment was come back to me in a week and show me what of these capital projects do you absolutely need to do, and which ones can you possibly push out? So that's what we came back with, and it doesn't look better if you look 10 years out, but for the 6-year rate, looks better.
The other critical
Yeah.
factor here is, this is the end of your long-term capital project planning. The comp plans it's a 6-year comp plan, you do it every 6 years, but they include a 20-year list of capital.
It's now a 10-year contract, but.
Oh, okay, but still, you have a 20-year CIP list in there. We have no information. If you go look at your comp plan, there's no information past this. That's the end point. So we know nothing. You are going to, what year is the comp plan?
We'll do it again in 2027, we'll start.
So just as you're entering this phase, you are gonna get a whole new 10 and 20-year CIP list that I don't think it's gonna be as bad as this, but if you don't think it's gonna be $10, $15 million, you're crazy. That's just, they're engineers, you cannot let them loose.
Be careful.
I know that.
I'm moving away.
That's why you should.
And I'm an engineer, so I don't.
Oh, did you?
Well, I guess to me, it does not make sense to do this austere. I'd rather that we prepared for that 6-year, I'm listening to you, Ashley. No. But it makes sense to me that we prepare so that we're not 6 years from now leaving whoever is here then making a horrible, horrible decision that everybody's gonna hate.
This is the long-term capital approach. We have the same initial 6 years, but then we recognize that what I've done is we've got 24 million in project costs. I'm willing to spend this down a bit. That's about as low as I'd want to go. So we are using reserves, but you can see we're going to go from 840,000 to 2.2 million. We're going to get up to that 50% mark.
Yeah.
Then, which means no more debt for quite a while.
Ashley, in your experience, doing a 10% increase, if we were to do that 24 and 25, is that gonna shift our revenues? Is that enough of an impact that people are gonna maybe not water as often?
The research shows that people are very elastic when it comes, there might be a temporary. But
And then maybe go
the,
back to normal?
the good news, and I almost forgot this. We can ameliorate some of this by the volume, the tiers.
Right.
We're assuming
Okay.
across the board,
Mhm.
we can structure it, so for example. The low user could actually lower their bill. The small, single person, we could actually lower their bill at the cost of the medium and large user picking up the tab. Or we can be more aggressive on all the tiers,
Mhm.
keep the current cost at the, even at the bottom. Do a nice adjustment for commercial to bring them up even higher,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Mhm.
multifamily.
And multifamily
Yeah.
too.
In which case, we could alleviate, we could very easily. Knock out a nice chunk of those, but this is paying for the next 6 years and then debt financing. Those 3 big projects, the remaining, and as you can see, 10, 10, and then 6s.
yes.
I have, and in fact, at this point, there's really no real reason to be doing these because we don't have capital to really make it meaningful, but essentially, this would put you at the end of the next rate study, having a considerable capital. Your rates haven't gone crazy, and you've still got enough reserves to build on.
Really, you've like tapped into the reserves if we're at the 7.8.
I can lower, I can make it.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, we are cutting into the end of year cash, right? So I mean, we're not trying to maintain where we're at now or the next.
I'd like to,
couple of
and
years, so.
it can, it's not difficult to do.
Yeah, I do, but I don't wanna ask it while he's concentrating on
Let's
his
see.
spreadsheet.
It's pretty good. on
I don't
there.
want it to go
Yeah,
berserk.
multitasking.
It looks like my bank statement though, you know, no,
Well, that's red.
yeah, all the red. The kids have been here for a while, so yeah.
Welcome back, sir.
Actually, I'll increase it on the-
Okay, I'm just
And I'll
saying
check
that
this
an alternative is not to spend you down that much. So if I take this project and debt finance it, I've restored a much more healthy balance. I'd be happy as a clam with that. But you can see,
Yeah, look at the impact.
Yeah,
you're gonna,
yeah,
this is probably where you'd have to use this time to catch up.
Yeah.
And maybe that bad. But at this point, that's 10%, so I'll stick by my guns. If you can't put away 10%, you're just not being responsible. But that would allow you, that would give you the range. Listen, we can do this. We have to be aggressive, more aggressive now. You don't have to set rates. Obviously, we're not saying set rates for 20 years. But I would say that the choice is pretty clear. I can go minimalist approach for our 6 years that we're gonna pass. And then leave it to the next city council to make the real tough call. Or I can set it high enough to where, give them flexibility, maneuvering room. Yes.
Councilmember Burke.
the question that I had, maybe more for Jeff, probably for both of you. The projects that we're putting out until the next comp plan are we endangering ourselves, maybe the wrong word, but is there a danger in putting those out so far? Would you prefer to do them earlier, and can we do them earlier, and what does that do to the financial?
Well, I'll speak to the first part. I don't think there's a danger putting them out. There's a risk and it's likely that they'll have to be pulled back closer.
Okay, that
And
kind of,
so again, we moved them out because we had to basically ranked choice, which is more important, this one right now or this one right now? Well, that one is important, but we'll have to say, let's try and see if we can get that pushed out. Is it realistic? I think that there might be some that come in sooner. There might be one or two that get pushed out sooner, but is it going to be lower overall? It's going to likely be higher overall in the nearer years.
I
So-
really like having another comprehensive plan. Because these are projects at the end of the 20-year window. And engineering terms, those are always the most problematic. They have the least amount of defined requirements. They're tied to the conditions that can change. And then the other factor is you only got so much staff.
Yeah,
If we
and
were to
that's,
roll stuff, I mean, oh my God, they're gonna be a busy team anyway.
that was kind of my question, was if you guys were comfortable rolling these out that far. And staff wise and everything else wise.
Councilmember Wood.
Thank you. What does this mean for the tier proposal? The 10%.
Well, that's a little bit separate question. Yeah, I would hate to start talking about tier. I mean, I think we need to at least understand some basics on this before we start talking about tier, because the tiers.
What we're gonna do is, if you guys can come to an agreement on the cash flow that you like, okay, I like the 10s and 6s. We will then, the next step will be to finish up the water volume analysis. We will come back to you and say, okay, this is how much money we're generating. This is how we affect your rate increases. We'll roll this right back into this, go through the water model again, and you can see, okay, now if I do this to water volume rates, I don't have to do 10% here. I can get by with a 6% or something like that. But it'll be a small, short, interactive process that allows you to make the decisions that you need to.
And that's the important part, to look at this 10%, we're looking at 10% per household, right? And so if the tiers, if what you just said is true, it may not be 10%.
That's right. You have the ability to put your hand on the scale of justice.
Wait. Councilmember Moore first.
Yeah. I appreciate that you asked us our opinion. And I appreciate all the work you went to, but you're the expert. I'm very interested in what your recommendation is, and I'm not interested in worrying about whether someone's got to make a tough decision later on. I'm worried about making the best fiduciary decision now, and the chips will fall where they may down the road.
That is my best recommendation. Short of volume changes, I like this approach the best, and this is the worst. Sewer and storm are nowhere near. Water started off on a bad footing. You needed those 2 10s regardless, so. And that's not usual. You guys focus in on usually water or sewer kind of alternately.
So I would defer to your plan and let us decide on the tiered thing.
Appreciate that.
If it's 10% up front, we can have our input on tiering it. And we ultimately, the total increase will be 10%. But the households aren't gonna see 10%, not all households are gonna see 10%.
That's right.
So
We can do a lot of things.
I think this is a complicated subject, but I think the solution isn't that complicated. I think we listen to you and we can shorten this conversation.
Where you shouldn't take me too seriously or downgrade your opinion is in the percentages in a given year. I like these cash flows. I think they work well. Can we get to very almost the same point by doing even? Yes.
So I don't defer to you easily. I defer dependent upon your 20-year success with this city. That's why I defer to your opinion.
You know what? You guys usually do set the rates in the years. We come in with what we think, but you guys are very independent bunch, and usually there's always been some adjustment on, well, I know I'd rather do this. And that's not a problem. I mean,
My fellow council members better have a very good reason for going against something that you recommend. That's my opinion.
Didn't you miss us then?
Councilmember Henderson.
Yeah, okay, so from what I'm understanding then, Now I'm understanding a little bit better about this. We're trying to figure out the cash flow. The tiering will then figure out who gets hit and whacked the most or who doesn't, whether it's commercial, multifamily, or residential. So that's a later discussion.
It's gonna have to be at this point.
Yeah.
This this defines the revenues we
That's
want
fine.
each year.
Okay, good.
And we will make that fit.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
I like that, because that'll lead into then water conservation.
Exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
got it. All right.
I think these are all great questions and great comments, and I appreciate it. Can we please though just take a 3-4 minute break? I know we're behind. You're the chair. But, yeah,
The water's the worst.
okay.
We still got a shot at.
Okay,
Still make-
okay.
I think that's,
I'm hopeful.
yes.
Okay, all right, so if we could pause for. Okay, we've returned from our break, and we're gonna continue on with our presentation. Councilmember Wolf had a question.
I do. Could we look at the numbers if we go even across the board?
Yes. Okay, so as you can see, this is our kind of our low stave in the barrel. At this projection. But we're bounded, we're reasonable. It's a 4-year dip, but we're at that point. We've got decent reserves and we're bringing that back. So if we get rid of those, now you can see I'm not happy with that. And you can see the impact on reserves. We just utilize half our reserves.
Interesting.
So if we want to make that,
Yeah, where's the 7?
there you go. In fact, you might be able to get by with 6.5.
And is there a reason why 7% is not a good thing?
No, they're just numbers. They're just numbers.
I'm trying to think about our citizens and what's easier for them, as opposed to 10%, 10%, 5, 5, 5, or 7 across the
The
board.
10% was kind of a carryover from the 6-year capital. Because we weren't doing a rate increase over 12 years. We only had 6 years, we kind of needed a bump at the start to get things going. So as you can see, this is almost indistinguishable from, we are a little shorter on reserves, but we're within margin of error. I mean, I can't say with a straight face that you're gonna be at 6.7, you could be at 7, you could be at 8, you could be at 5.
Mhm.
Just, it's too far out there. If debt costs change, I'm being very pessimistic. I got you in at 6%. Currently, it's 4.5 to 5%. But the nearest debt we have is 3 years out. I'm not willing to, if I go short on everything. The rates don't work, then you need more rates.
Yeah. So Jeff, does the 7% across the board make a difference to you?
That's what,
But remember, it's tiering.
Yes, it may not end up.
Right,
being
some,
7%.
we could set 7%, and some people's gonna see 15% perhaps, and some may see 3, so I wouldn't necessarily worry if we say 10, that doesn't mean your individual homeowners can see their rate go up 10%.
but I
if-
think
If
that's,
it's 7%, we know that it's not gonna go up 10%.
Well, it may first,
Yeah.
no,
how we tier it.
but I think maybe where you're going is the suggestion that you guys had worked on was 10, 10, and then 6s. What is the difference, not money wise, but in your projects and assessment that 10, 10, 6s makes as opposed to 7s?
As you can see, there's absolutely no, this revenue line is almost identical. The only difference is about maybe $1 million less in reserving. And like I said, over 10 years, that's just well within the margin of error.
Okay.
I hate to say that, $1 million is margin of error, but
Yeah.
there's just too many unknowns.
Not mine.
It's just
Yeah.
money.
Any other questions? Councilmember Henry?
Well, and again, back to the end of year cash, the farther out we go, the more uncertainty we have
Yes.
on capital projects. And the more we keep pushing out, deferred maintenance always costs twice as much at the end when trying to get around to it. We have to be careful saying, yeah, in 2031, we're looking at $6.4 million. It may be that by then things are starting to break. I think we've got a mixed age of facilities, right? Some are pretty new. We're not gonna have to do anything for a while, right? And some are like, that's getting a little long in the tooth. And some are like, well, that should have been worked on 2 years ago. So what we don't know, and again, that plays into this just as much, but we're focused on revenue because that's what we kind of control with the numbers, but we don't have a great deal of control over where we put these things. And the farther out we go, the more uncertainty we have. And which for me as an engineer, I'd say, I want to keep that out years high just because I don't know what's going on. And if it turns out that everything we fix in the first 5 years is great, we don't need to do anything, then we can go back and do another rate and drop it back down again. But I hate to get short of money.
Councilmember Rosenberg.
We seem to focus a lot on the percent increase, but if you look at the dollar increase.
Yeah.
If that 2024 is, $5 a month more to a ratepayer. Is that right?
Well, these are bi-monthly rates, so that's $5 in 2 months. So
For 2 months,
250.
so $2.50 a month, or about 50 cents a week increase.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna hurt anyone, and the ones that it may hurt. When we get to the tiered discussion, we'll have the opportunity to pay less, and that won't hurt them at all.
Yeah, excellent.
So I think we're focused too much on the percent, and I don't mind 10, 10, 7, 7, 7, 7.
It's an excellent point. I am worried about the range here. I don't like going from 84 to 144. But we're not gonna be there. You're gonna be at this point when we have your new comprehensive plan, and that information is known. That'll be your next rate evaluation. These can go away. But we've set you up to be able to handle the worst case scenario, and if things get better, then hey, you just don't have to do the next time around.
And look at the reserves we'll have at that,
Yeah.
it's substantially more.
Could you stick the 6, 10, the 10, 10, 6, 6, 6, 6
Sure.
back in, please?
Yeah, let's see, you're ending up at 189.27. Yes, that's $7 in, doing the tens up front brought the final rate down $7.
Interesting.
So a 5% lowering on the endpoint by just doing it sooner versus later.
And I guess to me, it makes sense to have that, it's not that much different in some ways, but to have that money in the bank sooner.
That's the whole, it's,
It makes sense to me to have it,
instead of the 1 or 2% rate increase going over 10 years, you've got all of them in one. And it also matches better with the discussion that, listen, we have been kind of neglecting water. Not neglecting, it's a bad pejorative term. We have been concentrating on the sewer because of the cost and the treatment plant and everything else. We're focusing our shift on the water, and we've got a couple of big projects that we have to do. And that's debt financing. We don't have a choice. And people understand, oh, my debt just went up. I've got to do something. They're more, in my opinion, they're more receptive to doing a one-time adjustment, bigger adjustment, and then lowering it down.
I just think this gives us more flexibility.
Councilmember Sturton.
Yeah,
I hate sevens, dude.
I feel like we're beating this one up. I'm ready to get to an agreement on like the next 2 years, and then what we need to do to maintain these numbers. So I think it's either the 7s or the 2 10s and 6s. I kind of lean towards the 2 10s. I like to just kind of get it over with. As far as a bigger payment. And I think how much time we're spending on this we better get ready for the tiered approach, because that's probably gonna take us any longer. So Ashley, to put you on the spot, we want to know your recommendation and then, of course, options, but when we get to that.
It's much easier, you're not gonna deviate greatly from statistics.
Okay, great.
So we'll have a structure and a firm recommendation. The main thing is gonna be how much do you wanna set back to the rate at? And that's just a scroll button, which is,
Yeah, I think we look at what regular, inflation is and cost of living. We start with that, towards the bottom. And then it goes up from there. That's
Yeah.
my thought.
Councilmember Henderson.
So would this scenario allow us to pull some projects move out in the future back a little bit, so they will cost less, we won't have as long to wait for inflation?
I've got inflation at 6.54 and then 2.5%.
Okay,
So really nothing that we can move forward far enough to get within 2.5% is not bad. You're not greatly upsetting. We're not gonna look at a whole different revenue projection by moving several million up by a year or 2 years.
okay.
And again, we're at that critical time when the next comp plan comes in and we get so much more information. Your 6-year CIP out of the comp plan is, that is a firm recommendation. You need to do this within the next 6 years.
And the economy may have changed by then as well.
Okay. All right, like I said, that was the worst. Okay, so
So did we come to an agreement?
oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I think it was so compelling that you thought I convinced everyone.
It was so forth. I'm dead serious. It's like $1.99. 6% looks to be different than 7%. It's 1%, but for me,
Yeah.
it's a,
Thank you.
Hope we make it 7.1, and look like we really thought.
6.9. I like that.
Look like we really thought about it. We wanted to stay away from the 7.
6.99.
So can we have a show of hands for the 10-10-6? So it looks
Would you go
like-
back to the water?
Yes,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
So you're wanting for the 6-year proposal, is what I'm hearing you say, before then, is going 10-10 and then 6 for the next 4 years. 10 years, 10, and 4 years.
And this, what really what we're looking for is just, is there support for this to continue?
To run the
into
model,
tiered
yeah.
model and
Yeah.
everything else? That's-
Yes, that's what, there's.
Okay, so it looks like you've got.
And remember that
Okay.
it's not unimportant that 6%, it's not true 6%. I mean, cost of living is every year. Everybody understands inflation. That's maybe 2 or 3 points above inflation. You're not doing horrendous rate increases here. These are minor adjustments over inflation.
And these
But
are
it's
costs.
6% on the 10% and the 10% and
Yeah,
that compounding, so.
Yes.
but if you're taking in more, then you're earning interest. on
You know what
your-
Einstein said about compounding.
And I think relative to the citizens paying the bills, once we have the tiered conversation, they'll be pleased with the fact that we want to be equitable. We're thinking about the people that can't afford it, so. And the ones that are gonna be an upper tier, they may not care.
What is it? Councilmember Henderson, do you have another question?
No,
Okay,
I just think that the tiering gives people an option to do something themselves.
Yeah.
Lower.
Give some control.
okay.
With a couple exceptions, and I can hardly wait till we have that conversation. Have a good analogy.
We look forward to it.
Okay, so now we're into the sewer system. The sewer system is in a lot better shape. You can see we're starting with another 4 million from the water fund. We don't have as near the capital. You see our total capital bill here is 31 million, but
I was just gonna say, no, big wood.
a third of that is in at the end of the study. So we've got, this is unacceptable, of course. We don't have a problem with capital. We can spend. I'm planning on spending that money up front. We don't have time, but at this point, this is where we need to say, okay, I'm unwilling to bring my reserves down to cut into that much. So we look at the short term, the 6 year, what it will just take us to get by.
Councilmember Storsand.
Yeah, so just looking across water, sewer and storm, do we have to keep these budgets entirely in their own tab?
Yes.
We do, okay, we can't just be like, hey, let's go up a little bit here, it's might seem, spreading the 10%.
They're
Yeah.
what's
Even though
called
there's less of
enterprise
a need.
funds. They're what's called enterprise funds. They have to be self-financing.
Oh, fine,
And they don't,
okay,
and they don't all serve the same people.
yeah, gotcha,
So,
right,
something to
okay,
keep in mind.
very good, thanks.
So you can see here, we're gonna, from a loan standpoint, you're starting off $2 million. So we're looking at about 30%. This is good. Wastewater always has a higher level of debt than the other utilities. Treatment plants are expensive. So, but we're starting off in a good place and a relatively good place. And you can see one of those debts is within the 6 year window of going bye-bye. And then another one, a couple of years later, goes bye-bye. And so all of a sudden, let's go back to the. So even with doing nothing, our debt payment by the end of the 6 year window has dropped considerably, and now we're looking at what? 10%, 20%, we're at 22-23% range. And for a treatment plant, a wastewater system, that's probably lower than I like from a long-term capital, that discussion. So I'm just like water, I'm willing to take on debt. I'm unwilling to choose to use reserves as opposed to take out new debt. I think we should take out new debt and maintain those reserves, because when you have the same thing on sewer. In fact, it's even shorter. That's our end of our list in 2028. And when's the next sewer comprehensive plan?
27, 28.
You are going to have a 10-20 year. And
Yes.
at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, we may be getting into large wastewater treatment plant facility replacement. Or rehab. And that, the cost of those are just enormous. So flexibility again, we wanna give you the most option, and we don't wanna hamstring the next city council in what they can do. So, as I said, we started with the 6 year. This gets us through to that data point. As you can see, we're keeping our cash reserves. And our net revenues are doing fine. And all we're doing is a 3% rate increase.
Which is hopefully right on with inflation.
That's, yeah, it's just a bump above.
And that's with no bond, no additional.
Yes, we are. We're
Okay.
going out you're going out for $17 million in loans.
For,
Those projects are the lift station 8 improvements, 10 improvements, 14, the construction cost, future lift station 17A in Forest Main, wastewater treatment plant improvements, remove sag and gravity pipe, upsize gravity pipe, and that one is outside of the window, so I did not treat it. But you can see at this point, we are actually, we're gonna sock away a couple $1 million, but I'm okay with that. Especially reserves, especially in the net revenue, because that's when the debt, those two debts come on. And you can see we actually balance off at a little bit lower than we are now, even with $17 million in debt.
And Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, please do, but I mean, this is a pretty aggressive capital construction schedule. So Ashley has put this in here saying if we are aggressive with our capital construction schedule, we're gonna be having these projects in these years. If for some reason we are not as aggressive as we would like to be, and these projects can push out a year, 2 years, we don't take those loans out. Why even start those loans? So they'll be deferred and construction might cost us more, but, it's not a must do.
Councilmember Schwartz.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I'm good with this. Obviously, we've already set the 5, 3s. And I also just wanna say, I'm amazed at this spreadsheet. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you if it's accurate. But
That's not accurate.
I couldn't tell you that, but you know, the amount of items in column B and all these numbers and the projects, and the time that it must have taken to put all
Yeah.
this stuff together. It's
Yeah.
amazing, and we're only a little over halfway through where we could scroll to, I think, so.
You can see the long-term strategy for this is the same as the 6-year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3% increases for the next 6 years, and you're setting yourself up
Very well.
for,
A little better than-
you're good, in good shape.
This tells me that you and I suffer from the same disease. This hyper focus with Excel,
Yeah.
you can make it do anything.
I
love it.
I was laughing with him, I was pulling my hair out last night, so.
One glitch.
That's
Real nice.
flashing, like it's an error.
Yeah. Formula error.
Councilmember Henderson.
So, one comment on that question. The design life on our wastewater treatment plant, you mentioned it might have to be replaced sometime, that's.
You're
not even
moving
on
into
our-
that territory, isn't it? In another 10 years, you're gonna be,
From 10 years.
because it
from
was
now.
about 15 years ago that we started.
Yeah, so it was built in phases.
Yeah,
But yeah, you know, the first phase was 2007.
Yeah, 2007 was beginning.
Yeah, 2009,
Yeah.
but then second phase was 2009, and then third phase was.
so we'd see that cost in column U,
The,
which is.
Yeah, we just off the screen.
All right, just, anyway, the
But-
comment, go ahead.
But that's treatment plant, and then you've got a lot of lift stations. You've seen what you had to do with lift station 6, lift station 12. We've got more coming up that are ending that sooner than, well, it's gonna be in these outlying years here when we look at them in the next comp plan.
And I'd like to agree with Seth on the amount of work that went into this. It's gonna keep us out of trouble, keep the city from going bankrupt, because when cities take on this stuff and they don't think about replacement and maintenance, it comes to bite them in their you know where, and then some just go bankrupt just because of that. And I like this looking forward like this. It's a lot of work, I get it, but what we're doing now is keeping us out of jail. I mean,
it's city council making proactive
Yeah.
choices and staff living up to the expectation. Because if you don't, because you set a 6-year schedule of rates, if staff isn't corresponding and saying, okay, well, I'm supposed to not spend that much, I'll move that project up. No, you start doing that and you end up with no money in the bank.
Are we doing a similar thing for like our roads and the other stuff, or is that because of non-enterprise accounts, or we don't?
They're not enterprise accounts, so we don't have rates that are guaranteed to come. Not guaranteed, but we don't have set rates, but we don't.
Councilmember Bud.
I think I really like what you put together here, but I'm wondering, since we know that we probably have a huge capital cost coming in. Okay, now I'm gonna say V because it's not showing. No, far out in the future, fairly far out in the future, should we be looking at increasing our reserves so that we have the money built up to help pay for that?
We are maintaining reserves and
Right, but I'm wondering if we should be building it.
your net revenue is $1 million a year.
Okay,
Over my 10%.
Yeah.
And that is now
Okay.
available. That means you can do another, let's just throw in. $15 million project.
So is this a bond then that you're adding, that you could? add?
Yes.
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to see make sure that we had planned that for that.
So the CIAC is a grant, for example, and the loan is debt is essentially.
So that's a little
Okay.
much, but
Okay,
we could finance an $8 million
Okay,
project without
I'm
doing a
good.
rate increase. And we haven't done, you see, we've got 2 years. We stopped here. If you continue on with these 3% increases,
yeah, true.
which you have been, every city council has been very proactive about at least doing a cost of living.
Okay,
So you
Okay.
do something like that. And
oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
So,
okay, so is
we
the
have a-
3% passing the smell test?
Mhm.
Yeah. one
Yeah.
does you.
okay.
We got a shot. Okay, stormwater is complicated by the fact that there's just not that many revenues. The magnitude of revenues are nowhere near, it's $1 million, so it dwarfs in comparison. And we've got, wow, we've got $35 million in projects. Now these are lumped into two massive, Donkey Creek and the Crescent Creek culvert replacement. And I have been delaying these projects for the last 20 years. Now Jeff thinks we got a shot at grant money,
That's my
Yeah.
question, yeah.
for about 2.5 of it. And you can't pass up that opportunity,
Mhm.
nowhere, no how. So
We have one grant application into the federal government for $4 million.
that's the one.
So that's for,
At Donkey?
for John Creek.
Now, also kudos. We would be having a very bad discussion if we did not do the commercial realignment.
Oh,
That
yes.
brought us
Oh,
a couple $100,000, guys. I mean, it bailed us out significantly, and rightly so. They needed to start paying it. I got no problem with that. So we're sitting here. This is the project that's gonna kill us. You can see. Even though we do have reserves here, and that's, believe me, you guys have been building this, amassing these reserves for 15 years now. In drips, a couple $100,000 a year. So, look at the 6-year.
There's a fire over the state line.
oh, I was just thinking, I smell something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard sirens already. It's close by.
That sheet on.
I'm just doing them all with blue super.
I'm gonna just go take a look.
You go take a look and inform us. Okay,
Thank you.
and if we need to evacuate.
Yeah. It was smelling.
Do we pause now?
Yeah, that's why we went.
Do we want to pause or should we keep on? Take a 5 minutes?
I'll call you.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, I should probably have my.
So are these funds eligible for Dave? I know he's investing some of the funds to get interest income for us,
To get what?
to get interest income for us.
Oh, yes, every.
So some of these funds we're investing in to get the 3.5%, 4%, 5% right now, which is not bad. Grant you inflation's gone a different way, but
It's called the LGIP,
yeah,
and it's a no risk state fund that allows all cities to participate. He may be doing some other things, because Dave's a sophisticated finance guy.
yeah.
But, yes, we've got you in. We've got
Yeah.
your interest earnings rate.
That looks
So-
like we may have an announcement.
Well, just I want to, smelling is there's a fire over by 16, the wind's blowing it over our building. And so we have fresh air intake and it's sucking in some outside air, which keeps on. You do that. That's what you
Okay.
smell.
So the Highway 16 again.
Yeah, when you look out to the west, you see some.
Okay, I just bumped that up a bit because I was unhappy with my pessimistic projection. We have been, the last 10 years have been freakish for interest earnings.
I know.
rates. I mean, it's been, it's never happened before in the history of this country. So we're just digging ourselves out of the zero cost of money.
Yeah.
And I'm unwilling to go back to 8-9%, but I just bumped that up a little, but there's actually, the sewer fund will help out a lot more. But we just don't have a lot of reserves here.
So we're earning income, but yeah, when we go and borrow, it's costing us more.
I've got you as
Yeah, all right.
Should be.
interest earnings, you can see is right there in that line item.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
And we went zero here because we don't have it, we've got belly up.
Yeah.
So this is the 6-year capital. This is not perfect. 4% rate increases pays for our half of Donkey Creek. We're getting 4 million in grant, and we're paying 4 million out of a revenue bond. That's where the debt is coming online. So all of a sudden we absorb that. That's eating up. You know, if we didn't have our 4%, we'd be serious trouble. So we like that. We don't like how we're leaving here. We're essentially saying, hey, we're at the end here. Go figure it out.
Does that mean we're betting that we're gonna get the grant for Donkey Creek? That's not always a
Yeah.
sure thing, or,
We won't know until later this year, until late fall.
so we're betting that.
We are, we're assuming.
You know, I didn't check it out, but it would be with a long-term approach, we may actually be able to afford that project in its entirety, as long as we give up the Crescent Creek. I can buy that. It might be, I hadn't thought of that darn well might be. So that's what we looked at. I looked at from a long-term standpoint was. And remember, stormwater is such a small amount, even though we're showing a 7% rate increase, I mean, that is $3.
Well, there'll be less, because we're not watering as much, so now you're.
How about the 2 outfalls, is that covered in this?
It is, you're talking about stormwater outfalls that we're proposing.
For the mitigation?
Yeah, that's included in here. Do you mind scrolling back to capital projects?
An outfall.
There you go. Well, that's a marine study, there's a project. Maybe it's down a little bit.
So is that debt percentage for 59 to 2.4?
Anything could have happened last night, Jeff.
Yeah.
Anything.
Let me pull up the stormwaters.
So anyway, the 7%,
Oh, I'm sorry. So the debt level going up to 450,000 in 2027 of the 2.4 million. Are you comfortable with that amount of debt repayment percentage?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, stormwater has the luxury of. Once the projects are reasonable, they're not large. Other than those two big ones, but they just don't come up often, and they're a lot more discretionary. They're not tied to growth. I mean, it's mainly an inconvenience and a little bit of environmental victory, which we can survive. It's not a gun to our head. We have to do this.
Some are state mandated.
It's getting, most of that is permit, it's administrative rather than projects.
Councilmember Henderson.
I'm confused about your capital projects there. We were talking about the culvert daylighting at Donkey Creek. But I see wastewater treatment plant creek reroute to Donkey Creek, and I thought we eliminated that. You may say, okay. sure.
Well, that's the title of the project. That's the,
Oh, okay.
But then below it though is the Crescent Creek culvert. Oh, that's Crescent Creek.
That's Crescent
Very
Creek.
good. Okay.
that first project, that's the exact name in the 2018 complex.
Okay.
So think of that as a North Creek.
All right.
And I did look, it's that limited amount of money that's down there under. It's called in this version because it goes back to 2018 comp plan outfall marine
Oh,
water
here,
study.
this one.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
you go.
That's where.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very interesting question is, can we, if things are bad, can we afford this without the grant? So right now we got 4 million in grant. So that just shifted it to cash, can't do cash all the way. So we need to bump that back. The answer is yes.
So if we don't get Crescent Creek, then we can still do Donkey
You
Creek.
see, we doubled our debt.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, we're now bordering on a very healthy 30%. So I'm not interested in doing more. But and it does eat up a lot of your reserves. I mean, that's problematic too.
Councilmember Martin.
So the state, if I recall, lost a lawsuit, which then forced the whole state to be replacing culverts to make sure that there was appropriate salmon flow. It's why we're all doing this work, if I remember correctly.
The State Department of Transportation did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so how long do we as Game Harbor or different jurisdictions, how long do we have to correct these issues?
We're not mandated by that lawsuit to replace these.
Okay.
But my guess is that we're next. I mean, they're gonna look at other jurisdictions. They just started with the state because they have the most.
So that's what it would take to balance over the long term. If we wanted to keep things consistent, I think we're probably gonna be looking at an 8.
And that's with the grant?
That is without the grant.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little light, but I'd be willing to roll the dice. That project cost may be a little lower or something that would influence that. I could live with that.
So we're-
Project cost is never gonna be lower.
Yeah. So are you more comfortable with us considering without the grant or with the grant?
Everything I've been told is a very strong application.
For both or for one?
Just for the. first project.
Okay, yeah.
Applied for, and that was $4 million.
Yeah.
So we could amend it if we didn't get the grant.
Absolutely.
And the
Then
impact,
I'm comfortable with 7.
the impact is not bad. If you get to the next rate study, it's not like, it's just a continuation of the 7%, a little bump. But again, this is one of those because the amount is so much less, the percentage seems a lot more.
Yeah.
So, and also it's good to point out. Yeah, I'm not happy about $65, $70 a month for water. But the fact that you are gonna be paying $80, $85 a month for sewer in 10 years. No, I mean, there are people, 85 was a valid number 5-10 years ago for people going through treatment plant replacement. You're gonna be situated to be able to do things even at a reasonable rate. So big picture wise, when you throw everything together, yes, the water is a little bit high, but sewer, you're in a nice sweet spot. And stormwater, you're probably in one of the worst places. You know, well, you're surrounded by water. I mean, where does the water go? It goes into a pristine
Pretty hard.
harbor, yes.
Okay, Councilmember.
Question, I may have just missed this when I stepped out, but we already kind of determined, Jeff, a somewhat of a, I don't know if it's tiered or not, but it's the impervious surface is how we're determining what fees are for the
Hard
stormwater.
service, yes.
Yeah,
Or hard service, that's different. Wrong word. So I'm just curious, like even when we put 8%, is that then again, kind of like what we talked about with water, where yes, some people are paying more because of their service.
Exactly, and that's based on what we did, effective last year. Yeah. And when we said that if you're going to have more hard surface on your residential property, you're going to pay.
Got it.
Yeah, that's
You
what that
would-
included.
If we hadn't done that, we'd be starting off with a 20-30%.
Yeah, I was just thinking if we hadn't have done that, it's, yeah.
So do you have a direction? You think that you-
Not for storm.
Okay,
I've heard a lot, but maybe it's because I stepped out. I'm not sure if we're going for the next 6 years, starting to at 7% or 8%.
so 7% with a grant,
Yeah.
was what you initially.
I have 7.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable then.
7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grade
Yeah.
7.
But
So you-
look, if you look at the dollar value,
It's.
why not 8?
Seven and it can be adjusted, yeah, and.
I say if we don't get the grant, we could adjust it up, but
Yeah.
go with 7, just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does that give you the direction? Did we
That
get
does.
through?
Well, yes, I want to talk about just a couple other things, next steps,
Okay.
but yeah, let me write this down. 7 across.
5 minutes.
Oh, let's solve the tiered approach, let's just go.
Yeah.
Can we give Ashley a hand? That,
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate working with Ashley because he's been here for so long, he knows it so well, he has this system set up. And it's, while it's complicated, it is also very helpful.
It's amazing.
Like I said, you guys been, I go back to Mark Hopkins
Wow.
as a city administrator. And his emphasis on growth, commercial growth. I mean, it's done, you guys are atypical, you've got a great commercial base.
So does your spreadsheet go all the way back 20 years? I don't want to see it. I'm just curious.
No, oh, God, no, because we do a new one every
Okay,
time. I
okay.
touch base with
Okay,
you.
Jeff.
All right, so I won't go into all these now, but we will be talking about tiered rates. We're gonna come back. We need to have a good idea about tiered rates before we go out and talk to the public. But that's the next step is we want to be able to make presentations, at least one to the public. We're been working with Tiffany on how to get the word out. Previously, what we've done is Ashley's come in, the utility managers come in, we make presentation to public, and then we hear back, Q&A. So we're planning on doing that, using all of our abilities to get the word out. Originally, I wanted to see if we could do that by the end of August or early September, and then come back to council with what we've heard. But now we're gonna add probably a study session to talk about tiered rates, so that's probably pushed out a little bit.
Okay.
And we're having some minor issues with data.
How quickly would you want the council to be teed up looking at those tier rates?
Well, ideally August is but I'll look at Ashley, because I keep pushing Ashley. She's like, am I taking a vacation?
No, it's, this actually, I mean, the data, the staff have been great, but there are limitations on the database, and we may. What I'm missing at this point is the confidence of being able to say, if we do this, here is the exact amount that's gonna occur, and I'd rather do that so we can be specific. Otherwise, we're gonna have to talk in generalities, and you're gonna have to be willing to come back in a year or two and see, okay, this is what actually happened, and I may have egg on my face. But in the meantime, from my standpoint, there's a survey, I don't know if it's been passed out, but we surveyed, just like we did on stormwater, 23
In the memo to them.
agencies, and what you should take away is nobody is doing tiered rates for commercial or multi-family. They cap them usually at or below the mid-tier of the residential rate. And there's a lot of professional reasons why and technical reasons why. And I've tried to put a lot of that into the explanation, so digest that. It really, it's, you guys would, like I said, every big agency in the state, it's commercial and multifamily is commercial. It's just a different classification of commercial. When you put tiered rates on them, you're saying that one business costs more than another, just because their scale is different. You can do that on residences because it's discretionary water use. If you look at your single family residential water use, it's 0 to 20, 100 cubic feet every 2 months. That's 90% of your customers. And so when you go out of that tier, and that's where we're gonna set the tiers, because that's the majority of the water use. You're looking to take discretionary water use. I can punish those guys because they're separate, they're unique, and they're doing something that I can pinpoint. Commercial, you're saying, well, if I'm a motel with 20 units, why should my cost of unit for water be different than if I'm at 40? I'm the same business. It's almost like government is being unfair to me just because I'm a different size. And that's very hard to justify when the marginal cost of water is actually, it's very cheap to increase water.
But it doesn't take into account the issue of conservation. I mean, that's, we're leaving that out again, like it's an infinite resource and that water has no value.
I better, if I'm gonna be consistent, and
Yeah.
you can set policy and I will march the drummer, then we set tiered rates for residential dramatically different. You set a high initial usage, and when you get into that medium range, it's double the cost. And when you get into that third range, it's triple, quadruple the cost. Now you're saying I'm treating residential as the same as commercial. But we don't, because getting that aggressive on residential makes some people I mean, their bills are gonna go to the roof. Consistency is it's your only requirement for setting rates. You cannot parcel out customers within the same customer class and treat them differently. And that's why multifamily and commercials are almost always, it's a flat rate.
But you can increase a flat rate.
Yeah,
I could set it at anywhere I want. I just can't say that if you're gonna use twice as much water, it costs me twice as much to provide you. Unless it were discretionary, but commercial, it's not discretionary. Their water use is production, it's business related, and that's the big difference.
It certainly sounds to me like we're discriminating against single family homes.
Yeah.
We're punishing single family homes over multifamily and commercial who are not. It looks like, I mean, maybe I'm not understanding this, but it seems like single family homes are being punished and that commercial and multifamilies are not paying their fair share.
We are distinguishing residential and punishing them. It's because they have the highest discretionary water use. Multifamily and commercial don't have high discretionary water
They
use.
should pay
But
for
they
it
should
anyway.
pay for it.
I've got a question, we're starting to get into discussion.
Yeah,
Raising the
I don't-
table, So, if we can table that.
That's gonna be a huge, it's gonna be a huge discussion, so I welcome you to read the stuff and start thinking about this. Because you're gonna get a battle. I'm not gonna give up easily on this one.
Oh, we won't either.
Okay, yeah.
And so Ashley's technical memo and his study was included in your package. They will probably encourage you to do that.
Last thing is when we look at the rates, the tier rate and all that, if we could take a look at our climate action plan, right? To see if there's anything there. I know there is in the Pierce County, I've copied and pasted some of the action items in our plan are water efficient landscape standards, stormwater runoff, new stormwater development, rainwater reuse program. Just what that means for people. Not saying that your rates would change, but as you communicate, saying, these are the tools or the other options you have to help you reduce your use of water.
I think that's gonna be
more
critical.
critical in the
One
communication.
asterisk to that is that the climate action plan is still under development,
Got
and
it.
so the council has not formally adopted
That's
those
right.
as policy yet.
Yeah,
And so as we're looking at those, council has not yet decided on adopting those.
yeah. So I think it all goes to the comprehensive plan, correct? That's just one piece of it.
But your point's well taken. And Jeff, you indicated that you're wanting to have this discussion in August, and there's one council meeting in August. I know there's multiple vacations. I have narrowed down 2 potential time zones we're gonna have to bump into September. The first would be August 14th ahead of the council meeting on Monday, the 14th. I know everybody loved that idea.
How much time do you think we're gonna need couple hours.
I would say at least an hour, an
Yeah.
hour and a half.
Oh, I would think longer than
Okay,
that.
well,
Yeah,
and
I think we
there's
should
something
plan
else we
to.
haven't even touched on is, and it does, we don't have to get into it at length, but. There's gonna be code revisions. When we come to council with the final document,
Yeah.
I want, and Ashley doesn't get involved in all of this, but. We need to talk code revisions. We wanna reset poverty guidelines. We wanna change it from having just a low income senior discount to a low income discount. And there's a few additional fees that I've talked to Eli and Jericho and Jeff, and they have some revisions that they wanna make, so I wanna be able to have some time. Doesn't have to be at this study session, we can focus the study session on tiered rates, but at some point I do, before we come back with the final version of the code revisions, because what you're gonna see is we're gonna wrap all this up into a very large code revision in chapter 13 for water sewer, and then 14 for stormwater rates. And so, along with that, it just makes sense to do all these corrections, revisions, updates that we talked about. Stormwater billing procedures, since we've implemented that a year and a half ago, there's a couple minor revisions that we've seen would improve the action that billing has to take. And then delinquencies, we want to set up payment plans. We've looked at payment plans, we have a COVID-19 payment plan now, and now what we have avoided having any additional payment plans because we don't have the time to put that into place right now, but we could utilize a future payment plan for where we might have to otherwise turn people off during periods of extreme. Anyway, all of that would be a lengthy discussion on its own.
Thank you, Jeff. The other option would be the 24th of August, which would be a Thursday.
I'm for good for the 24th. I like that one.
I'm not good on the 24th.
Okay.
I think our odds of making the 24th are a lot better.
Well, if we're gonna look at the week after that, we'll be in
What
September.
about the 31st?
31st is all, let me check.
I don't think I can do that.
Yeah, Jeff is in lean training, the lean Kaizen, our current process that day.
And at the same time, I'm in the tour with the building symposium.
Right. So the-
Two meetings at the same time.
It happens.
what about September 7th?
That's good. for me.
Sure.
I know it's not.
We'll be ready as soon as that is got through. We'll be ready to write the ordinances.
Well, have a public meeting and.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, but I'm saying,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we'll be in the phase of implementation, because we definitely want the January, you want the kickoff.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah.
Oh.
The 7th.
The 7th is that. was-
So
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
tiers rate, but then Deb's got a whole mess of other stuff. Is that at
Later.
another time, or we
Yeah.
want to just do a big long meeting? Do you want to discuss the other topics on the 7th that you would?
Ideally, yes.
If we can just decide if council's okay with the 7th, there's a number of other things that have been waiting for you guys as well.
Yeah.
Sounds-
Yes, 7th is
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Okay, so do you have what you need and we're good? And we're only 700.
So, and if I understand, so then utility rates are going up 20%, 10 and 3 and 7.
That's not the way I consider it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
No,
so they're
because
going up each individually.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So that would average to around
Yeah.
6%.
so hopefully when you explain that, years ago, I was at an excellent, a public meeting that the two of you did. And you did an amazing job. And so yeah, it's always better to talk about dollars than to talk about percentages. I think it's easier for the public to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that's like saying, that's like,
I've heard him before. Jeff and Nate, hasn't council ever met Ashley before? And I said, I think Jenny might. have.
Yeah.
well, on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
You've been on the city council several cycles.
No, this is just my, what's my 4th year? And I got, apparently I have 4 more years. after.
Before we adjourn, I just want to let you all know that there is a brush fire on Highway 16 under the Willachet overpass. The fire department is out there, however, westbound on-ramp is closed. So if you're going that way, you'll need to get on at a different location.
Is it on the westbound side or
Yeah,
eastbound?
the westbound side.
You trip on the same.
If you're going towards
Don't get on the watch.
Purdy, you won't be able to get on at Willachet.
If I jump right out here and go towards Bremerton,
You're gonna wanna go up.
No.
No, you'll
You're
need
gonna wanna go to Peacock Hill, get on a
Yeah,
curve.
go down the harbor, head up towards Costco. Home Depot.
Oh, I've never done the back way around,
go
okay. Yeah.
Scenic route, great.
Get off.
Yeah.
have dinner here.
You know, the last time I came through, there was real accident. I tried every accident. We've been so hard. And every time I pull off, the GPS would say, how you just added 15 minutes.
Have we officially adjourned?
No, we haven't.
I have no motion to adjourn.
Thank you so much. You guys started doing
Never.
Somebody should do something about that traffic.